So the cabinet secretary is advised to PM on whatever matter he advised in short, and such as the classification of subject, their grouping into suitable portfolio, allocation of particular minister, a transferring subject or department from ministry to another. While tendering this advice to PM, the cabinet secretary may also consult the other secretary to government. For this purpose, an institution arrangement exists form of committee secretary on administration headed by cabinet secretary, which advise PM. The cabinet secretary is also chairman of chief secretary committee. Through this committee, she gets information required about any state transmit to PM. The cabinet secretary do provide the eyes and ear for PM, but he is the sense of watchdog and investigator behalf of PM. The worst thing that could happen would be for any member of council of ministry to feel that the cabinet secretary or the for the matter any other official is sent to spy on him, or that the official may have the ear of prime minister to carry tales. The cabinet secretary has a general staff function, not a line function in relation with PM. After independence, the state have involved on two different tracks, one with the departure of Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, the two most charismatic centralizing prime minister. The state have acquired increasingly great autonomy, thus giving substance to the federal character of our political system. And the state themselves have been constantly losing steam, and this process is not necessarily linked to their becoming more autonomous, but it waits during the tenure of Indian Gandhi. The root cause of degeneration is the tenure of political apparatus at the state level and the feudal character. The chief minister of state is MLA of the party coalition, and that the party has been able to cobble together. Every political party is faction ridden, and faction leaders are all time plotting to replace CM. This makes the position of CM insecure, and the only way is he keeps to remain in the power is to win or faction leader for offering them all sort of soaps. It is great that where the team that an executive head of state gets elected for 5 years, he himself to seek in mandate on the day-to-day basis. No wonder the office of chief minister become the most precious and now shaking assignment. In relation to PM and country, the cabinet secretary has yet another role to play. Like all civil servants, he provides the element of stability, continuity to PM. And a caretaker PM and the ministry does exist in the interim period, but it is the time that the service of cabinet secretary are of immense value. At such time, he advised to President and PM and his cabinet and new PM and his cabinet and provides assistance according to the provision of Constitution. In all his form, cabinet secretary is expected to function in background as a shock absorber without coming into the limelight. So question next is Indian Prime Minister should not only be accountable to the Indian Parliament but should appear to so comment on accountability of Prime Minister to Indian Parliament in context of extra constitutional power. So India has parliamentary form of government in which President is the symbolic head of government, whereas the Prime Minister is the actual head. He is head of Council of Ministry, although Prime Minister is said to be first among equal in practical terms to hold immense executive power. With power comes responsibility, accountability, and executive is part of Parliament and executive accountable to the Parliament. The Prime Minister, being the head of the executive, is also accountable to the Parliament. The Constitution under Article 74 provides for the institution of Prime Minister to head the Council of Ministry. He is also responsible for giving aid and advice to President, which are binding. If the government is in majority in Parliament, the power of Prime Minister become more. This needs accountability. The Parliament has the duty to stand him responsible for all the acts he does as a supreme executive. This makes him accountable. Not only constitution, but there are some extra constitutional body which are so powerful and influential and which are headed by Prime Minister, like Cabinet, Planning Commission, National Development Council. All these bodies shape the direction of country progress because of Cabinet is highest decision making body. All the major decision emanate Cabinet for healthy democracy, and Prime Minister as the head of Cabinet be made accountable to the Parliament. As the head of Planning Commission, the National Development Council of Prime Minister is responsible for selecting the pace of development, and if he become an indicator director absence of accountability, the country can be in danger of losing its democratic character. For any healthy and democratic, it is important that the Parliament should be considered supreme, and it should be Parliament which will legislate and give the practical shape to needs of the people. So the Prime Minister is not very accountable, then the very institution of Parliament, spirit behind the Parliament from government will be in the danger. Eventually the constitution together with the democracy within the danger. So for this purpose it is imperative for the Prime Minister to be accountable to Parliament, and they should also appear accountable because it is healthy and harmonious balance between PM and Parliament and democracy. Next question is, the President of India act like grandparents, and if younger generation does not follow, just unable to do anything. So the President of India, though head of the state like grandparent and head of the family, represents only a symbol of a state with real power enjoyed by the younger generation, Council of Ministry and Prime Minister. Under Article 53, all executive power of the Union India shall be vested President, but Article 74 clearly states that the President has to act upon the advice given by Council of Ministry headed by Prime Minister. This simply means that the President is not only the de jure authority while the Council of Ministry act as a de facto authority. So 44 Constitutional Amendment Act clearly mentioned that the President can return any bill only once the reconsideration of Council of Ministry. If the same bill comes again without modification, then it being binding upon President to sign on it. Moreover, there is no constitutional discretion power to the President. He has certain situational discretionary power which are unable to help him and independently while appraising the point with the President must act on the advice of his ministers. President V.V. Giri observed it would not mean that he has nothing his own to add, but what he add on should be done, not the embrace the government but the strengthen the head dealing with them. Therefore, the President of India clearly resembles grandparent of family. Next question, there is a separate central ministry or department on each subject allocated to state list. Does it mean supremacy of union government or the emphasis development administration? So the political and administration setup of India is essentially a quasi-federal. So a state as a unit are free to develop within the ambit, yet they are essentially subject to control by the central government. The state subject provided under list 2 of the 7th schedule are always monitored, controlled and reviewed by the central authority. For the facilitator of this, there is separate ministry or the department subject in a state, Ministry of Agriculture, Water Resource and Health. All this clearly reflect the supremacy of central government or state. To smoothen the control and central ministry or state subject, the subject of state lists have been made subject to provision list 1, which is exclusively control the union government. Moreover, the power of Parliament to make law, rules and regulations supreme in Indian Constitution under Article 249, 252, 253 and subjects state on in such cases the central ministry and department enjoy vast power. The ordinance making power under also comes into the action mainly in case of contingency or under wanted situation. Here also the power of centre to a legislate over state subject is wide and open. Moreover, the office of governor in state is seen as the urgent agent of centre, and the discretionary power of governor further add to the power of centre and state. In matters like tribal area and the revenue sharing regulation of mines, governor enjoy vast power and this increase the significance of centre. The fact represent only one side of coin. In fact, the state enjoy considerable scope to work for their progress. The setting up ministry and department or state subject is by and large part of large process of decentralization and development. In fact, it is practically impossible to administer from union level over the large country like India. The state also enjoys significant amount of autonomy and freedom within their jurisdiction. The power of implementation of program lie mainly with state units with only broad guidelines coming from center. For example, any disease eradication program, Ministry of Health to the level, but the onus of implement this program is in true spirit. And moreover, the central ministry and department facilities the availability of fund input at the state level. And the Ministry of Agriculture center level ensure allocation of input for irrigation, seed, fertilizer, agriculture purpose. The establishment of ministry and department at the central level, a mechanism to ensure flexibility, monitoring, review, control and evaluation of the policy. It assists the microscopically the notion of center supremacy sound more relevant and feasible. In fact, agency like Planning Commission, National Development Council, Finance Commission makes Center Ministry and Department of more powerful dealing with the state subject. The coalition politics also plays significant role, but all such practice essentially harms spirit of cooperative federalism. Next question. Administrative talent of a minister determine his success. Ministers are political heads of ministry which derive his authority from legislature. He is accountable to people and legislature for his act and as a secretary under principal anonymity. So it is ministers that takes policy decision concern ministry formulate policy guidelines and he is assisted by secretary in his act policy formulation, monitoring of policy and therefore to run affairs of ministry smoothly and efficient manner needs better coordination. Minister and his secretary as well as official, the minister also needs to coordinate with the ministry for various policy matters and interministerial balance and coordination. This can achieve more efficiently by the minister who have better administration skill and capacity. So in view of all challenging tasks, administration talent is needed to make the balance at the level of intra-ministerial conflict or interministerial conflict and cooperation. In this way, administration talent ministry determines success. Does the emergence of empowered group of ministers at the center level impair the doctrine of cabinet responsibility? So it is asking the doctrine of cabinet responsibility empowered group of ministers. Okay, so the empowered group of ministers which imply the empowered group of minister and administrative powerhouse that can take decision on behalf of Indian government as a whole. This is done in order to avoid the delay and the red tapeism of the Indian government bureaucracy and comprise of two or more ministers of the government. Usually the composition will be such as senior minister will be member and the minister of the concerned department issue is constituted are also part of it. So all the member or some of the member of the group are member of the cabinet as sometimes some expert may also be present. So Article 75 states that the Council of Ministry are collectively responsible for Lok Sabha. And this means that all the ministers own joint responsibility of Lok Sabha for all that action or omission and commission. They work as a team and swim and swim together. The principle of collective responsibility also means that cabinet decision bind all cabinet ministers even if they differed from the cabinet decision now takes away the duty of cabinet to arrive at the solution. This certainly affects the doctrine of collective responsibility and decision is not arrived at consensus for all ministers but all the members are also member of cabinet and this does not mean decision is taken cabinet because it is only part of cabinet but not an entire cabinet. In the era of hung parliament, power of president expands more. So when the incumbent decide to be assertive, comment on the statement with respect to situation in India. So in the wake of the current political strain, appointment of prime minister in case of fractured mandate seems to be precedent. Not only is bound duty imposed upon constitution, but he also has to justice million of people entrusted their faith highest executive office of the land. So the Sarkaria Commission was appointed to answer the same question came up for the following recommendation. The first preference is to given to the pre-poll alliance commanding a majority of house. The second preference is to given to the single largest party. The third preference is given to the post-election alliance and the fourth and last preference is given to the alliance where some of may join the government and others provide outside support. However, this classification available pose certain fundamental problem. Classification fact party is closely to majority. Even though third option might have a majority, the presidential invite single party. Nevertheless, the Sarkaria Commission support important precise president as having an important role in appointment of prime minister. And the Constitution of India define the ministry 74. The term prime minister and council of ministry are the term minister is used in the term of union cabinet reading established beyond doubt that prime minister is the part of council of ministry. And the next question to answer then is whether article 75 which incorporates the doctrine of pleasure also apply the prime minister. If the prime minister is included within the definition of minister given 75(2), then the president would surely be required to play a significant role. And furthermore, under the third schedule of constitution there is no separate oath for the prime minister and the other ministry of union. Hence it can be said prime minister is also a minister within the meaning of enjoy office during the pleasure of president. Therefore it is established beyond doubt that the president has the significant role to play as far as appointment of Prime Minister is concerned in all times. However, hung parliament, his role become even more important. President play a vital role appointment of PM in case of hung parliament, whereas the lift with no choice in the case of clear verdict, still the role of president is more powerful. An assertiveness of the incumbent president is whatever the assertiveness shown by the president which will be truncated by the power of parliament and determine the term condition office of president. Next is judge and courts have created reinstated statutory authority and expanded their own power and enhanced their standing legislative and executive. So, as the consciousness of social justice spread through the India multi-layered social order, court began to come under increasing social action on behalf of underprivileged and deprived section of society, fulfilling the aspiration. The judiciary could not remain insensitive, and various commissions appointed by the government for reform judiciary and the legal system expressed concern for costly and slow judicial process. After the declaration of internal emergency, also emerged strong human rights movement in country. Within the Supreme Court, some judges asked questioning in the limited understanding of spirit and philosophy of Constitution. They expressed that along with the fundamental right, democracy and social justice was also hallmark. And if this principle are integrated part of Constitution, then the court will protect Constitution. Must also be participate in the process of implementation of directive principle of democratic norms, and this realization gave rise not only for the new judicial activism positive sense, also process of reform judicial system. The significant outcome of this development were PIL and Lok Adalat and Lok Legal Aid, and the landscape of recent Supreme Court ruling offers some interesting insight into the metamorphosis of judicial activism. And most strongly of Supreme Court recently issued a notice to the Union government seeking explanation step taken ameliorate the Indian student in Australia who have been facing racially motivated attack and foreign policy widely considered to non-justifiable. So court cannot interfere, yet the interference by Indian court have not wholly been condemned. And the next equally striking incident of Supreme Court notice questioning of proliferation of Mayawati allegedly worth crore of rupees Uttar Pradesh like foreign policy budgetary allocation are non-justiciable, but judicial interference in this matter too have not been depreciated. And again the notice that issued background of pending judicial inquiries, High Court corruption charges following the impeachment motion, on the dire need to shock and awe judicial delay and to deracinate alleged judicial corruption, striking contrast otherwise legitimate restraint of judicial office. The word judicial activism has become powerful weapon of empowerment. But how did judicial activism metamorph for the illegitimate into the real of legitimate? However, judicial activism in India has now taken the interesting phase. The court in the India pursue from the new review, and a term used famously Peter Hogg, allusion context of capture Supreme Court of decision. The Indian Supreme Court got beyond the protection of socially and economically downtrodden and the realm of public administration. So the opinion often resemble aspiration rather than binding pronouncement. For example, Supreme Court issued guidelines reform the police administration and state, and while state assembly can legislate, similar guidelines have been issued increasingly in the legislation. And this opinion at the theory employee must how act against sexual harassment, bank must be prudent in the use of recovery agent, and police officers must follow procedures prior to an arrest. Discuss the evaluation of role of Prime Minister office. Institutional arrangements have evolved over the year in the form of secretariat agency to thinking cell to give direct assistance to Prime Minister, and the main institution involved helping the PM on decision making realm of political administrative have and been cabinet committee, cabinet secretariat and Prime Minister office. The Prime Minister office can enter existence after India become independent. The Prime Minister Secretariat as it was then no provided the Secretariat assistant needed by Prime Minister and public activity and function as a head of government. The role of Prime Minister office evolved the various Prime Minister to Prime Minister under Nehru, and size of office was limited. So was its role under this tenure greater reliance being ministry, and their advice seemed to have been characteristic by the working of Cabinet Secretary provided a primary link. In subsequent period, Prime Minister Secretariat has been performing same as the function through all cabinet matters must go through the Cabinet Secretariat. Demarcation between the two is not rigid, and indeed it cannot be so. It was Nehru's successor Shastri who took the first step toward the establishment of powerful secretariat. He appointed L.K. Jha as Secretary of Prime Minister, and he became the head of Secretariat. Jha, powerful and dynamic personality, raised the status and stature of the Secretariat and also added its tasks. Under the Shah stewardship, the Prime Minister office started commanding a formidable influence of making decisions, a trend which got further strengthened during the Indira Gandhi. At the time assuming office, she had a very limited experience of administration, and the dependency of Secretariat became greater, especially on complex economic foreign policy. This became all more marked during the period of internal emergency, which ushered era of authorization of Prime Minister rule. As a consequence, the Prime Minister Secretary became the focus of all authority and obeyed by all the central ministry, department and other executive. During the Indira Gandhi reign, Prime Minister Secretary virtually became a national policy formulation body and Cabinet Secretary in its environment arm. During the Janata Party periods, and efforts were made to diffuse the existing concentration of power in Prime Minister Secretariat and reduce its to the status of mere office whose functions were merely secretariat in nature. As a result, the secretariat was devastated. However, in the 3 decades, there is noticeable trend towards the centralization, concentration of policy-making power in the secretariat, and there remains a feeling often articulated by the opposition newspaper from time to time that Prime Minister Secretariat is micro-cabinet, and it often attempts to supplement the cabinet in all major policy making.